Tonight, we are fortunate to have Andy Flynn, who is the editor and publisher of the Lake Placid News and the Adirondack Attic, also an author. Before I start with him, though, a couple of things I need to remember. First of all, thank you for signing in. If you haven't, make sure that you do so. Also, cell phones, please turn your cell phones on mute. And then also, we are selling gift card basket raffles. And I need to explain that due to the fact that the Festival of Colors has been canceled, we are extending our date for that. So the drawing is going to be November 1st. And that gives us some more time to sell gift card basket raffle tickets. We are going to be at the Keene Valley Farmers Market on October 13th, as well as at the Halloween event in Wilmington on October 27th. So the drawing is going to be, I believe it's a Friday, November 1st. Gives you lots of time to purchase tickets, but you can also do online. So, and we will change the date for the drawing. Otherwise, everything is exactly the same. So without further ado, I hope you all brought some artifacts. Andy is going to do some presenting first. Andy.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks to the Wilmington Historical Society for having me here. Welcome to all the members. So, I moved to Tupper Lake when I was 6 years old. That was 1976. So I grew up and went to school in Tupper Lake. Went to college at SUNY Fredonia because it was the farthest state school from Tupper Lake, and ended up moving back to the Adirondacks because it's a beautiful place to live. So, so eventually I got work at North Public Radio and the Adirondack Daily Enterprise, Lake Placid News, as a reporter. And then spent about 9 years at the Adirondack Art Agency as the PR guy at the Visitor Interpretive Centers. And then I eventually made my way back to the Lake Placid News and as the editor for 10 years. And I've been editor-publisher of both papers for almost a year now. So that's me in a nutshell. But in the meantime, when I was gone from newspapers, I started a column called the Adirondack Attic, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. That's where my books came from and my radio show on Wilmington Public Radio. So I want to start with a story. This may have happened to you, I don't know. So Mrs. Wilson lived across the street before she passed away. She went down to her basement, she was cleaning up. She came over, she knew I was a history nerd. And she says, "You want this?" I'm like, "I don't know what it is." "Sure, why not?" We looked at it. Karen or Larissa? I know it's early, isn't it? You just should pass that around. So be very careful. It's over 100 years old. So I didn't know much about this artifact until I did some digging because there's a maker's mark. So how many folks brought artifacts tonight? Okay, we've got a few. Some artifacts have maker's marks, some of them don't. This one does. So it says he was A. Schoenhut company out of Philadelphia, a toy maker. And so doing some digging, it says born in 1848. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Albert Schoenhut came from a toy making family in Württemberg, Germany. He was invited to come to Philadelphia in 1866 to repair toy pianos for the John Wanamaker department store. By 1872, he started his own toy piano company. Eventually, the A. Schoenhut company, before World War I, was the largest toy company in the U.S. Employed over 400 workers. It went bankrupt in 1935, but thankfully not before they made this artifact that I'm passing around. So I found this, and initially, does anybody who's seen it tell me what they think this is? Go ahead. Anybody?
A smoking pipe?
Smoking pipe. No. Kids toy, but for what? What does it look like?
Which
Puppet
one?
show?
What's that?
Puppet show?
Nope. What does the handle look like if you were to?
Golf?
Yes. It's a toy for indoor golf. So I found that company made it. This is called
Oh,
Tommy Green. It dates to, the patent is 1922. So, but if you looked at it real close, it doesn't look the same. So I did some digging this morning. And I found, I'll just read this. Schoenhut's indoor golf game was originally introduced with Tommy Green. Immediately, there was demand made for a female golf player, that there should be a female mannequin to give credit to their sex. To please the ladies, Sissy Lofter was added, and this is not Tommy Green, this is Sissy Lofter. So I will show you. You probably can't tell, but let me show you. This is what I was reading from. So they had a schematic. So all these things would come in a box. That's Tommy and Sissy playing golf indoors. And the front of the box showed a man and a woman playing indoor golf. I know it's hard to see. You can pass that around if you want. Actually, you can pass a lot of these around. Now you'll notice when you see these, it comes with its own sand traps and everything. You can really make your own golf course in your own house. So thanks to Mrs. Wilson, who's cleaning out her basement, I got this little gem. So this is pretty cool. There. So the Adirondack Attic series started in 2003. Seems like a lifetime ago. I was working for the Adirondack Art Agency at the time, and they only let me work 37 and a half hours a week. I was used to working as the managing editor of the daily paper, a lot more than that. So I had some spare time. I had a lot of energy. I'm like, well, let's go into the Adirondack Museum, now called the Adirondack Experience, Blue Mountain Lake, and explore their collection. So I talked them into me coming, I didn't go once a week, I went once a month, and I would go shopping for different artifacts. Like just like you do at the Lake Placid Elementary School for the 4th grade history fair. They pick an artifact, they do research, and they tell a story. And so that's what I did. Every week for over 6 years, I wrote a weekly newspaper column for papers like Plattsburgh Paper, Lake Placid, Saranac Lake, Glens Falls, Old Fort, those papers for over 6 years, and at the end of each year, I put together a book. So each chapter tells a different story, and every week tells a different story about an artifact. So that was a lot of fun. So there's, you see these later on, there's a date at the top. That was just the date of my deadline for the newspaper. That's all that was. So after over 6 years of doing that, because my background is in radio, really, and I made the transition to newspaper. I went to North Country Public Radio. I said, what if I do a radio show? So they said, sure. So I started doing a monthly radio show where it wasn't just the Adirondack Museum. There was places all over the North Country. I even went down to the New York State Museum to interview some folks about a couple artifacts there. So that was a lot of fun. I did that for about 7 years. So that's where a lot of these stories come from. The stuff that's on the table that I brought is from my own collection. So we'll tell those stories. But nobody's asking. If you want to ask me what my favorite story was, it's about a bobsled. Favorite story that I worked on. It was Iron Shoes bobsled. I went down to the Adirondack Museum, has an Iron Shoes bobsled that dates from the 1930s. The Linney brothers from Lion Mountain, they got into bobsledding. after the 1932 Olympics in Lake Placid. And they built bobsleds out of all iron. And so the Linney brothers raced from the 30s into the 40s. And their parents only wanted one of the Linney brothers to race, because if they both raced together and they got in a crash, they lose both of their sons. So Bob Linney was the one who was bobsledding him first, and he had his team that was a 4-man sled, not a 2-man sled. So I saw iron shoes down at the Adirondack Museum. Then I went to Elizabethtown, and at the Adirondack History Museum, they have an iron shoes bobsled. What's going on here? Then I go to the Lyon Mountain, the Railroad Museum. Anybody been there? It's a really nice place. They have an iron shoes bobsled. Like, what's going on? So, so this story just kept growing and growing and growing. I found an iron shoes here and iron shoes there. And in their practice sleds were iron and wood, and it was like iron something else. They even had iron clippers. You know, there were pictures of Pete Smith on these sleds with Lenny and his gang. So that was one of those stories that really that grew, and it was like solving a mystery. That's what I like the most about whatever story I'm working on, is solving a mystery. I go to the New York State Historic Newspapers website, and I just they have digitized newspapers. Most of the collection of the Lake Placid News back in 1914 is on there. And I go with one question and spend 8 hours, and I'm just happy. You know, I may miss a meal. I go to the bathroom. I don't care. I just love to go down that rabbit hole. And at the end of the 8 hours, I don't even remember what my first question was, because one leads to another, and that's for me the most amount of fun. So then, when the newspaper article came out, I got a phone call from some guy in Saranac Lake. He says, I got one of those bobsleds. I'm like, my God, this is never going to end. And he had it outside, hanging on his shed, but it wasn't in iron shoes, it was iron. You could tell the letters were gone, but you could tell where the letters were, so you could read iron shoes, but it was one of the practice sleds. So it was wooden and it was iron, and that was a lot of fun. So that's one of my favorite stories. So I love solving mysteries. It can get tiring because but it's a lot of fun. But after weeks of looking into certain things, sometimes you have to tell somebody else that what they had written about was wrong, because based on your research. And while that's a good thing, setting the record straight, you don't want to embarrass the person. You don't want to say, oh, you got this wrong, just to say it's wrong. You want to set the record straight. So in the Lake Placid News on page 5 every week, I do a column called, it's one of those archive columns from Lake Placid News Archives called History is Cool. I thought maybe kids would want to read this and they would say history is cool and they would believe it. That's why I call it that. So, so it's from the archives 100 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, those sorts of things. So I did 100 years ago in early July, and I found this article about the Lake Placid Golf and Country Club starting up. Eventually, they changed the name to Craigwood, so in Lake Placid. So this is in 1924, in the summer of 1924, they opened it up. So there was a story in the Lake Placid News previewing it, and said this was going to happen. When it happened, they covered it. And Seymour Dunn, who was the golf pro at the Lake Placid Club, designed, it was only 9 holes at the time, now it's 18. He designed it. But I also found stories, it wasn't just about opening that golf course. It was about what happened before then. So I was finding stories in Lake Placid News, even 2 years earlier, that there was this concept in the Chamber of Commerce. I think it was the Chamber, I think Seymour Dunn was involved at the time, in early 1922, that there needs to be a public golf course, a municipal golf course. If you think about it, at the time, they had these exclusive resorts, the Roussillon, the Lake Placid Club, all these private places, Stevens House. Average people coming up to vacation in Lake Placid didn't have a place to play golf. So the idea was, let's build a golf course for everyone. And so that's why, you wouldn't know it today, anybody could play any of the golf courses. But back then, this was Rick was sharing. This was great, you know, you open up a municipal golf course, you bring in more people. They were all about that, and they still are in Lake Placid. Bring people, let's give them what they want. And so, so I found this, and then I went to I did some more research. I'm like, this is really cool. I went to the website for Craigwood Golf course, and it said it opened in 1925. Not 1924. I'm like, did I screw up? I went back. I said, no, what's going on here? So I figured, who wrote the books on, the history books on the golf courses in the Adirondacks? Peter Martin. He used to be the golf pro at the Lake Placid Club Resort. And so I found out, I ordered from the library, you can buy the books, but I ordered from the library, his book from 1987 on Adirondack golf courses. And then at the same time, he wrote a book about Craig Wood, you know, the professional golfer, the blonde bomber in Lake Placid. He's buried at the North Elba Cemetery, if you're into cemetery tours. Not anywhere near North John Rondo, but they're both. So in both of those books, Peter wrote that Craig Wood, when it was called the Lake Placid Golf and Country Club, opened in 1925. So I called Peter up. I said, Peter, could you help me with this? This is what I'm finding. He did some digging. He called me back. He says, you're right. It was 1924. So Craigwood is they're not celebrating the centennial because they don't know about it. Once I found the original, I called the town supervisor up, and you know, people love to celebrate centennials, you know, and they didn't know about it. So I'm in the middle of this research now because I want to get it right. I don't want to say so-and-so got it wrong. I just want to set the record straight. And then, hey, if we have a centennial, let's celebrate. So I'm in the middle of that right now. So this is one of those mysteries I didn't even know I solved until I'm digging. So where do you find artifacts? Let's talk about where. Some of these artifacts are from different places. Some of the artifacts that I've written about or come from different places, not just the Adirondack Museum. Everybody has artifacts in town. Gilbert, right? Yes. You're an artifact. I was told. But I was told. Yes. Okay. So, other than husbands or significant others, we have objects here. So, garage sales are a great place to find artifacts. Estate sales, auctions, those sorts of places. The historic Saranac Lake, which is now redoing their Trudeau House and museum. They just got a $250,000 grant for displays, which is pretty exciting. They operate the Saranac Laboratory and Museum there on Church Street in Saranac Lake. And back in the 1990s, they were raising funds to rehabilitate the Union Depot Railroad Station. And so they had one of these sales. And there was an old theater chair there. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. You know, I'm in my 20s, I'm still a history nerd back then. And I'm like, I gotta buy this. It wasn't that expensive, it went to a good cause. And I was told by one of the board members that it came from the State Theater in Tupper Lake. I was excited. I grew up in Tupper Lake. This is wonderful news. Well, I did some digging. It didn't come from the State Theater. It came from the Palace Theater in Lake Placid. And it had a wooden back on it. So it was there in, I think it was 1926. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. 1926 at the Palace Theater opened. And it was before talkies. So they had the wooden backs. Eventually, when you opened up a theater, there was sound, it had cushion seats because of the acoustics. So, so that was one of the things that helped. Somebody helped me find that, and I found out more information that this was definitely from the Palace Theater, and I wrote about it for the Adirondack Attic, and I donated the chair to the Adirondack Museum at the same time. And this was wonderful. It was it had been repainted. It was used at Pendragon Theater before they redid their chairs. And the best part about this chair for me, I mean, it has a cushion seat, like faux leather or whatever, it could be real leather. And the wooden back, but if you lift the chair, there's still a piece of gum on the bottom. That's the best part for me. So you can find things at these sales, you know, artifacts. And they have actually, if you go to the Palace Theater now, I think they frame this story next to a row of these seats. So if you go in, last time I was there, it was before COVID, but it was to the right, so it may still be there. Obviously, in your attic, you can find stuff. In your basement, you can find stuff. In your garage, you can find stuff. So in Tupper Lake, in my home in Tupper Lake, before I went to college and all that sort of stuff, we actually had one of these attics where it was just, you move the thing and you had to climb up with a ladder, one of those things. My parents were cleaning that out. They reached in and they found this. Now, you all know what this is? Viewfinder, stereoscope, right? It features, this is Bob's. So, but I have a number here. You guys can, if you want to pass this around, you can look at your photo. Or unless you want to talk about your photo later. You can talk about your photo now. Okay.
This is a stereo card. I found it on eBay. And on eBay, yeah, I had a search routine set up for Wilmington. So stuff in Wilmington would show up. So this showed up. And I said, geez, you know, what year is this? And we figured out it was 1872. You know, photography still kind of new back then. And for Wilmington, someone had a camera. This has to be the only picture of Wilmington from that time period. Okay, so when you take a look at this, this is Andy's stereoscope here. The bottom part of this is moves too easily, so it'll fall right off the back. So kind of hang on to that when you look through this, and move the picture in and out, and it will focus for you, unless you're totally blind like I am.
Tell them what it is a picture of.
I don't know, they'll find out. So look closely at the picture, and you'll see what's on it.
And the camera that was used to take these was different. I think I had two lenses. You got blocks. So, but these were for, all right, the labels here. I love labels because it gives you clues. Keystone Geography Units by Stereographs, the Keystone View Company, Meadville, Pennsylvania. These cards, these images come from all over the world. There's a lot from, I think they date to the 1920s. I can't be certain, but I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of photos of World War I troops, but they're, you know, like I said, it says geography unit. These are used, to the best of my knowledge, in the Potsdam school district to teach geography. So it wasn't just for tourists to remember, you know, coming to Wilmington. It's also used for education purposes before they started, you know, showing movies so the teacher could get a break. So this actually came from my attic. I'm trying to see if there's anything else from my attic. These aren't, but my mom gave me these, you know, spoons and little toys when I was a baby. You know, but people probably have these at home. Where else? Archaeology. You can dig stuff up in your, you know, your backyard. This didn't come from my backyard. This came, I lived at Saranac Inn for a while near the fish hatchery. And I was walking in the woods with my black lab, Lulu. And it was near the train, the old train station used to be located near there, you know, with the tracks. And even though the tracks are gone, you can still find artifacts in the woods. Because when they raised the building, they put a lot of trash in the woods. And so I'm coming across porcelain, probably from a sink, or toilet, I don't know. But this was half buried. And I didn't know what it was at first. After some digging, I know what it is now. Anybody have an idea?
Honey pot.
Honey pot. I love it. It's not, but. I love it. Anybody?
It's something similar, but it's actually a campaign lantern.
Close.
A wet lantern?
A campaign,
It is a
Campaign
lantern.
lantern,
political campaign.
what's a campaign lantern?
Well, it would be on the end of a pole, and you hold it up there, and this thing would be burning kerosene or whatever. And hopefully it'd be burn on here. You know, that's what they were targeted, it was a lantern, but they had the political campaign, that's what.
I love it.
Have that, right off the pole.
It is a lantern, but not from a campaign.
Okay.
There is some marking on here. It says NYC East. This was found near train station. What's that? New York Central, yeah. So this would have been used, I don't know if it was on a train or probably from the train station, because they bury a lot of trash there. And then, the guy who sold me the theater chair has one of these, and I interviewed him for a radio show for North Country Public Radio. He has an intact one in his house. Another history nerd, they're all around. And so I interviewed him at his house, and he showed me one that was in great condition. So this is a railroad oil lamp. Full. We don't have the glass obviously, but it was half buried, and you can see where the wick comes up. There's even some teeth. I'm not gonna pass it around, but when it come up later, you can check it out.
So that would have had a chimney.
Yes, glass, yeah. So like his, he even has a lit one. And I took a picture, hanging on the wall on one of those regular lamps that you have. I don't know how many people have oil lamps at home. I still have them. Nothing like this. So I don't know when it was dated, but it was nice that it had a marking on it. So you can find stuff. Archaeology in the woods. It wasn't a dig on purpose, but that's just the whole. All right. This is an odd one, and it came from 2017, so it's not old. But for me, it was an artifact. I don't know when you had your teeth pulled when you were a kid, parents may save your teeth. Yeah, everybody's like, I don't like my teeth pulled. But sometimes the first teeth were saved, for the tooth fairy or whatever. Well, this is something from the hospital that was saved. I went into the ER because I had shortness of breath in 2017, and they found some pulmonary embolisms. I had some blood clots in my lungs and near my heart, and they rushed me off to the Burlington, to the hospital there, in the back of in an ambulance, and not knowing whether I was going to survive. So, but I did. I'm here. So 7 years later, but this is from when I came back from Burlington, the doctor in Saranac Lake, Dr. Rowland, he put in an IVC filter in inferior vena cava. I don't know if healthcare is out there. It prevents. You can pass this around. It looks like one of the things you urinate in. It's not. It was just from. So you'll notice it has a lot of things like this, metal. So they placed it in there, so if a blood clot was coming up, it would dissipate and go away. So they had me on some medications, but before they put me on like warfarin or something like that, anticoagulant, they gave me that, they took that out, that took a long time. And then put me on warfarin. So I thought, oh, this is significant to me, doesn't matter to anybody else.
That's in your heart, the inferior.
It was inferior, yep.
Wow.
Yep, they tried to take it out this way and they had to go down, yeah. They had a hard time.
That's a hard thing.
It's a hard effect, yes.
Oh,
So how many folks went to the 1980 Olympics? All right, got some folks here. I was 10 years old. And, on North Country Public Radio, I did a radio story about this artifact from the 1980 games. I knew it was in my attic, so I actually taped myself looking for it in the attic. Then I taped my mom. I did a little interview with my mom saying, why did you want your two kids to go to the Olympics? So that was fun. You know, it's just, you know, you can listen to the interview, but how often do the Olympics come your home?
Right.
So, we drove to Saranac Lake, we had to take a bus to Lake Placid. And because my parents were on a budget. I asked her why we went to, one of the first hockey games. It was on February 12th, 1980, the day before the opening ceremony. Why did we go to see, Czechoslovakia versus Norway? And she says, well, the tickets were cheaper. Before the opening ceremony, so that's why we went. And we watched the Miracle on Ice. We weren't one of the 20,000 people there, and the number keeps growing. It wasn't actually 20,000, it was a lot less. But we watched on TV in Tupper Lake, and we were excited like everybody else. But what happened was before the game, the other teams would come and do some warm-up laps before their games. Maybe spend, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 minutes on the ice warming up, then go in the locker rooms, another team would come out. So when the Swedish team, which eventually won bronze that year, was practicing, this came into the stands. And I started for it and volunteer, picked it up and handed it. So, and it says made in Czechoslovakia, which doesn't exist anymore. So. Anybody tell me what this is? Safe louder. It's a bank. Great. This is a bank. I don't know if it's probably from the 1950s. It was owned by my uncle, Uncle Joe, and it's pretty cool. It's a rocket, and then it looks like I don't know what this is, but you bring it down, and then you put your penny in there, and you press this, and it goes up, and there's a little slot there. And there was a plug at the bottom, eventually, you didn't have to break it like a piggy bank, but you just took it out. But that's what this is, and I love it. And I don't know what the marking is on it, but that's pretty cool.
So, who found the name of this building? What Whiteface Mountain House? Where was it located? Where the pizza place is now.
Yeah.
This was the first edition of that building. There were other ones, another one after that, a little bit more modern. But that got torn down like 52, I think somewhere there. 56. All right, so I got torn down, and what they put in place? A gas station.
There were, on the North Country Public Radio website, there was one comment when this story was posted, there was one comment. Some guy simply said, sometimes the value is the one you hold in your heart. Pretty cool. Other places, there are, photos, either in your collection or somebody else's, old photos, video, film, and recordings. I did a story about a recording from 1959 of Noah John Rondo from, I think it was WGY, interview with him. So I did a story about that. That was fun.
Thank you.
Does everybody know down the front door? Does anybody not know?
Anybody not know? Hermit of Cold River. Anyway, after the big blow, the big storm that came through the Adirondacks in 1950 that leveled a lot of the trees in the backcountry. We had a hermitage on the Cold River in what is now the High Peaks Wilderness. It was owned by a lumber company back then. He was kicked out by the conservation department, and then eventually moved to Lake Placid. He spent some time in Wilmington at Santa Claus at the North Pole. He did a lot of sportsman shows. And his parts of his hermitage were moved to the Adirondack Museum. So you can go to the Adirondack Experience Museum of Blue Mountain Lake and see part of his hermitage there. And part of the interview, they were asking about his hermitage and asking his reaction that some of it would be saved and moved, you know. And so he gave a nice answer. He's like, it doesn't belong to me as much as it belongs to you. So he was thrilled. But couple more artifacts and then we'll get to other. I haven't really looked into this, but this would be a nice fun project. When I worked for the Pulse Visitor Center as a PR guy, we for Christmas time, all the volunteers and the staff would go into their attics and their garages and find just a prank gift. And we wrap them and put them under the tree. We have, a potluck dinner. Then after the dinner, we all, pick numbers and then we go and choose a gift. This is one of those gifts. Made in Austria. Being that we're from the Adirondacks. An outdoor stove. I can't get it out. I'll let you know it's an outdoor stove. Anyway, I haven't really taken it out before, so let's not do that. Don't break it.
What do you mean outdoors?
That's what it is. So, well, when I got it, the person who put it under the tree told me what it was. So apparently they wanted to get rid of it. I thought it was pretty cool. It's nice. Still on my bookshelf. I figured that out.
Like a camping stove.
Yeah, it's camping stove. You bring in the woods. Okay. They're a little lighter nowadays. Yeah, that's all I have. We have, anybody else? You have one more?
I know there's a few people here that already know what this is, because you couldn't wait until we all got together. So I'll pass this around. The one side has the maker's name on it, which was in Massachusetts. And the other side has all the numbers on it. And I'll just let you know that they are 1-inch markings. There's a pointer right here. It's loose. This should be something that you should be able to position probably at the 0 mark, and it would lock in place. And of course, as this rolls, what's it rolling on is the question. You're measuring, but what?
And that's been around in one. Oh, here's some of yours. Karen's coming up. She's got stuff from the collection of the Wilmington Historical Society. Some really good ones.
The oldest.
The oldest, okay.
The oldest that I've ever.
Show the camera.
Any idea what that is? It's smooth on the inside.
Is it part of a cannon?
Yes,
That's it.
yep, part of a cannon. What cannon? Not a cannon. Wilmington has a story about a cannon. Oh. In 1850, this was one of the stories, there are several stories. But the first story, on July 4th, 1840, the good old Wilmington boys got up in the morning to check on their cannon, because every 4th of July, they would shoot up the cannon at some appointed time in the town park as part of the celebration of the 4th of July. They were very patriotic. A lot of them had served, or their ancestors had served in the War of 1812 or the Revolutionary War. So it was a very patriotic town at the time. So when they went up to check on the cannon, it wasn't there. Not there, gone. Where did it go? So they did some investigating. They followed the tracks. Where did the tracks go? the tracks went to Black Brook. So all the Wilmington boys got together and they hightailed it over to Black Brook and found out where it was. They stole it back and then celebrated all the way back. They celebrated in multiple ways because they ended up writing a poem, a song, music up to it, all of that thing. And actually you can hear or you can see all of that on our website. If you go to Wilmington Historical Society.org, that and the song is on our website. So why does it look like that though? That's because they shot it up every year and they let people borrow it. So Keene borrowed it in 1884. They put the wrong powder in it
Oh, no.
and it blew apart. So the library had it. It was donated to the library by the owner. I forgot the owner's name, but and the library recently donated it to the Historical Society for safety. So that's part of one of our earliest stories of Wilmington history.
Okay, so where do we end up? Anybody have any idea what you mentioned? Was it? Nope. Nope. What? No. It's not really used to bend along the ground, although you see highway guys today, they have electronic ones. They're actually measuring with something similar to this design. However, this was used back in the days of wooden wagon wheels. They would set the pointer at 0. They would measure around the wheel with this. So that they would have the measurement so they can measure the iron bar where it gets the right length of the iron bar to bend that around the wooden wheel. That's what they use this for.
How'd you find that out?
I looked it up.
That's great.
But that's what that was used for. I found this in an antique shop. It was $30. I said, well, that's kind of cool. I was a shop teacher. That's a ruler. So what's it for? You know, that, so I have it.
Yeah.
So I found it, on eBay, so they have some on eBay, you get brand new ones there, that's ETSY. That one, yeah. They might, I think, new ones here, I think. I don't know why, but they do.
I'm gonna have my helper too, Yvonne, to kind of help us with this one, okay? And there's a story and then a story that Andy was there for the second part of the story. This is a sign or part of a sign. This was says we pronounce it Awasa Club, but I'll tell you that it's not Awasa. It is. I recently found out that it was supposed to be pronounced Owaisa, but in Wilmington we called it Awasa. The Awasa Club, Wilmington, New York, August 20th. August 20th, when? On the back, August 20th, 1937. And this is a country fair. All right, a country fair to earn money for the Awasa or Owaisa Club. So what was the Awasa Club? The Awasa Club was founded by Mrs. Merrill, her first name, sorry, her and her sister, Mrs. Brown, in memory of Mrs. Merrill's daughter. Her little girl had died in a tragic car accident in 1917 at about age 10 years old. She's buried in one of our in one of our cemeteries. I'm not sure off the top of my head which one, but she's buried up here. She and her sister decided to do something in memory of her daughter. So a couple years later, in 1920, they founded the Awasa Club. It was a club, or the Bluebird Club first. Owaisa means bluebird in Native American language. So So after they founded the Bluebird Club for girls, eventually they got land. And in 1920, they built a building called again, for the Owasso Club. And it was for more than just girls, it was girls and boys, and then eventually it became for everyone. And both residents and summer residents and summer visitors all got to pay their dues and become part of the Owasso Club. They had swimming lessons, they had dances, they had in the building, they had a band, they had baseball, they had all kinds of things that went on, lessons for kids and all kinds of things. So that went on for many years in memory of little Mildred Merrill. Now, the second part of the story is Andy was there with us for the 4th grade history fair project at Lake Placid Central School. And this year, one of the little girls decided to take this as her artifact. Again, they have to measure it, look at it, describe it, kind of like Mysteries at the Museum, if you've ever watched that TV show, Mysteries at the Museum. And then they have to research it. So I gave her a couple of Wilmington books to research it. So she researched it, and they have to do a presentation. Normally the presentation pretty much is always a poster, but kids do different kinds of things. But this year they had more freedom to do all kinds of presentations. She decided to do a puppet show. And as Andy knows, she got me because she started off she used popsicle sticks, and she had the whole thing. She had a box. She had sewn curtains for this. She had all this. Really, it was great. And she started off with Mildred Merrill playing, and then she closed the curtain, and then opened the curtain, and then Mrs. Merrill and her sister are talking. Oh, we're so sad that Mildred passed away. The accident was tragic, and what do you think we should do? And one of them says, I think we ought to create a club for girls. Oh, do you really think so? Yes, I think we should. Oh, what shall we call it? How about we call it the Owasso Club or Owasso Club? That means bluebird in Native American. Oh, that sounds good. Who shall be at it? Oh, let's do it for girls. Curtain closes. Curtain opens back up. More people in the puppet show. And it's everybody having fun at the Owasso Club. I lost it. I lost it when she was. Tears are streaming. Yeah, tears are streaming down my face. So there's a little girl in Wilmington in the cemetery whose name may not have been mentioned for a very long time, and it was part of a story in a 4th grade classroom this past June. So. For the 4th grade history fair, this is one of their favorite objects that the artifacts, rather, that the kids like to do research on. These don't look like Olympic medals, but they led to one. Any idea who they might have been?
Bob Peters.
What? An Olympian from Wilmington, Jeannie Ashworth. Jeannie Ashworth donated these to the Wilmington Historical Society quite a number of years ago. These are speed skating medals from the New York State Outdoor Speed Skating Championship, Wilmington, New York, February 8th through 8th, I don't know that. February 5th, excuse me, February 5 and 6, 1955. So they were awarded to Jean. She came from Wilmington, Massachusetts, and competed in Wilmington, New York, and then eventually lived in Wilmington, New York, and then became our town supervisor after that kind of thing. So she went from Wilmington to Wilmington. But the kids love this project. I'm going to pass this around because if you look at the medals, it's got Santa's workshop. It has Santa and a reindeer and White Face Mountain in the background. It's a really, really cool, both really cool medals, and she won them both. For what are you asking? First place intermediate, 220 yards, and first place intermediate 440 yards. So that's when she won that in 1955. And then, of course, she goes on later to go to the Olympics in Squaw Valley. And she came in 1960, she was the bronze medalist in the 500 meter. And that was the first speed skating event for women in 1960. So she participated in the very first one. That's long. And the medal for women.
She also learned and practiced much of her skating right there on the river in the winter that goes over. Right.
And I also know that she would do some of her training by running up the White Base High Road. And there was always a gentleman there who would say, you know, slow down, you're gonna hurt yourself. One last thing. Got any good guesses? Andy,
No. Guys, give me some hints.
well, it says white place, that's good. It's a poncho. For. Interesting. Yeah, it's for the chairlift. Because back in the day, on the chairlift, there wasn't a gondola. So it was really chilly until you ride up. And your equipment and your clothing wasn't as warm as what we have today. So this protected you from the wind and from the cold weather as you were going up the chairlift. This have a white face to take your ski down. And we have a photo. I'm not sure to later. We have a photo of actually Jackie Kennedy wearing this on her way up the mountain to ski.
So they were used at least until the 60s or
Yeah, 50s, well, definitely. It was yeah, and in the 60s, from 59. Yeah. The second, not the marble one. Current location of whiteness skiing.
So they became the name tags after that?
Yeah. But this is another one that kids like to do because they like to research skiing. That's all I have.
All right, folks, who brought stuff, come on up. One at a time.
You do yours. The sweaters in there.
Your sweater's not.
Sweater's not an artifact, it's just a cape.
So you have to come up here and present it because there's a camera here. Sorry, Tim. This will be nice.
Okay.
This, when we first started coming out to the Adirondacks, I was 6 years old, it was in 1966. And we went to a camp in Old Forge, it was on Third Lake.
And it was my grandmaster. He was a judge in Portland. And we came out to the summer camp. His big thing was sailing. He would go out on a sailing. And he always sailed around in a bathing suit. Bathing suit. And he would go to the Bald Mountain camp with the college. There was a very elegant hotel, the Bald Mountain House. And so he'd like to go to the dock there and flirt with all the 50-year-old waitresses that were selling themselves during the day. And so one day he's going over to he has this, he's hosting this dinner for the Bar Association. And they're in the elegant restaurant sitting around and everything. And one of the waitresses comes up and she's serving. And she goes, "Oh, Judge Briggs, I didn't recognize you with your clothes on." So he was in, my grandmother was, bought the camp originally. And he was in the Depression, 1930, and that wasn't such a good year. So he got the camp, he got the Chinese servants' quarters, and he got the boathouse all for $3,000. And these are two of the paintings. They came with furniture and the artwork too. So these were two of the sketches that were on the wall that I don't really know anything about. So if anybody knows anything, you can fill me in. They are the only marking on it. One says the forest is a sanitarium, I think. And so
It's
there's
SAND, sand terrarium, not sanitarium. Somebody was being clever.
Yeah,
They didn't get it.
somebody was
Wrong
being
sign.
so they're not signed or anything. There's probably a couple of initials up here that say HW. And all I know they would have been in the camp when they purchased it in 1930. Other than that, I don't really know anything about it. Well, that's
Can you show that to the archive?
And if anyone knows, it's because we destroyed their framing this afternoon to try to see if there was a author, we couldn't remember, so we took the box cutter to cut apart hundreds of dollars.
Thank you, Kevin. Talking about artifacts, you get good, it's really good stories, but it's usually about people. And it's not just a story about the artifacts, sometimes it is. It's a story about the people who owned it or used it or whatever. Anybody else?
Which is why I went to school, I'm a historian and went to school in Williamsburg. And the best places to find stuff are privies.
Privies.
Because people would throw, particularly in the 18th century, throw everything down the privy. So if you can go into the outhouse stuff, there's treasures.
About 15 years ago, my wife and I bought a house in Wilmington, another house in Wilmington that had been empty for about 10 years prior to that, or purchasing it, taken it by raccoons, whatever. But this was part of the collection. Basically, what we thought was trash, pictures of frames. These are punched here. These are predecessors to what we built other stickers back in the 70s. This one from there, and then finds that is Lake Placid, and then of course, for years it was workshop. So, I'm curious about the name because I taught graphic arts for a few years back in the 1980s. Myself and he's a other stickers that I it's trying to predate that. These have been arguing with the forest.
Thank you. Not gonna ask who's been to Sand Workshop, it's pretty close, and it's still open, but how many folks remember going to 1,000 Animals in Lake Placid? Yeah. So.
Got the bears marshmallows, right?
Marshmallows.
Yes. Bears.
The bears.
Bears.
The bears were on top of the pole on a little platform. You drove by.
Yep. They certainly were. feeding bears. How many folks fed bears at landfills in the Adirondacks? Yeah. I wrote about one, an old photo of somebody feeding a bear in Tupper Lake near one of the landfills. That was taken by Kathleen Vigro, Tupper Lake photographer for many, many years for the Enterprise and for the Tupper Lake Free Press. In fact, she took a lot of my photos as a kid growing up at ball games or this or that. And she took this really neat photo. Please, it's in this book. It's on the front page, but it's in here somewhere. You can pass that around. So part of the story that I wrote about was my experience going to feed the bears. In the 70s, my parents would, my brother and I, Steve, they would take us down to the A&P when we had AMPs and get marshmallows and go out to where Horseshoe Lake is, Horseshoe Pond, near where the old American Legion camp was on Big Pepper Lake. So that road there was an old landfill, and at twilight, in the summertime, that's when the bears would go up there and there'd be rows of cars. This happened all throughout the Adirondacks, and like there are stories from Long Lake and Old Forge, and they would go to the landfills. And this was a tourist attraction. Like if you go to New Hampshire, you go at twilight to see the moose. Well, in Pepper Lake was to go see the bears. And we would roll down the windows a little bit and throw the marshmallows out and that sort of thing. This photo, some guy outside of his car feeding a bear. Oh, I'm sorry. Here, let me
I was trying to figure out which was the title.
yeah, I can find it. Pepper Lake feeding bear photo, page 132. Yeah, that you see the rows of cars, and then the bear leaning against the car, and then people outside their car. I never got outside the car when I was a kid, but that's just nuts. And then there's one guy who looks like he's taking a photo of the bear. So we'll send these around. We can send this around too. I love it. Anybody else bring something? Yes.
I just have a thing, yeah, we didn't know we were supposed to bring something, and I could have brought this anyway, but my family has had a camping since 1962 in Adirondack Attic. It is 102 years old, and the first owner was a school teacher in New York City. And every summer, she would take the 3 days in her Model T and drive up to Wilmington. And underneath one of the tables in our screened-in porch, which serves as our dining room table, there's an inscription that reads, "To Ida Mae Brown from Frank Evers."
Oh, wow. Very nice. All right, so for the people who are watching the video, it's a dining room table that said to
Ida Mae Brown.
Ida Mae Brown
was the original owner. She had pamphlets.
From Frank Everest. Somebody from the Wilmington Historical Society, please tell us about Frank Everest for the camera. You've been to the town beach. If you ever been in the Owasso Club, probably in town beach, Lake Everest, right?
Everest.
Okay, Frank Everest.
Frank Evers. Frank Evers came to Wilmington in the late 1800s, about 1898 or so. And he eventually purchased the White Face Mountain House, which you had passed around. There was the first White Face Mountain House. And in 1906, I think, I might be off a year or so on that, it burned. And then he created the new White Face Mountain House, and from then on, it was, looked just like that, except it was 3 stories. 3 stories. And it had a bar, and I mean, they expanded it, and at that time period. Frank Evers was, it was the center of town, and literally the center. I mean, and everybody came to it, everybody had dinners, they had Sunday dinners for, Sunday dinners for Jalen. Something like that. So, he was very central in creating, Wilmington as a tourist economy. Very central. It was very popular right this mountain house. It had many rooms. You rent many rooms, but you could also rent. Not kayaks, canoes and rowboats and that kind of thing. So it really started the idea of this tourism package deal thing, and he was all part of that. He was also very big in the politics of the town. It all kind of centered around Frank Evers. A lot of that. So,
And I think that's something to do with White Face Mountain as well.
yeah, yes. And so, one of the things that he did also, well, a couple things. One was he brought electricity to Wilmington because he needed electricity to, upgrade his White Face Mountain House. So they had just a local on the river, on the dam. They used the dam and created electricity that way. My grandfather, Gordon Marshall, ran the electricity there, ran the dam. And then, so they started electrifying all the other camps and stuff along the river. And in 1926, maybe, then it became, the electricity then came from elsewhere, from one of Salem or somewhere. No longer from Wilmington's own dam. But he was central in all of that. And he ran hiking. He had guides, and the guides would take people up White Face. With horses, they would start off with horses, and then about a mile or half a mile from the top, they had a cabin, and the cabin would be for staying overnight or for stopping and having lunch and all that kind of thing. They would do. I'm missing anything? Yeah. Okay.
And if you want to learn more about Wilmington history, you can take the Wilmington Historic Walking Tour, right? Of the downtown area, all about these old places, White Face Mountain House and the dam and all sorts of history. I think it's fascinating.
And we have 2 books also, that you can find on our website. And one of them was helped greatly by Tim.
It's a great book. I always say, we just made it into a book. Karen, they're the ones, the Historical Society, who just did a yeoman's job of compiling this stuff. We just made it into a book, but it's a great book.
Speaking of books, I have Adirondack Attic books here for sale. All the proceeds tonight will go to the Wilmington Historical Society for their building fund, because they need a home. And so we need to.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, so I've got single ones, I've got volumes 2 through 5 here, volume 2 through 6, I'm sorry, volume 1 is out of print, so. And we'll just take donations, just donate, so.
What are you thought of where you are with the building?
Where we are with the building, okay, so we have from our own raising, from all of you and helping, we have about 300, almost 275 in the bank and a money market fund. We also, recently received a grant from the New York State Council on the Arts. For we applied for another grant, which we didn't get, but, we're about, so we have about $1 million, it's about 1.7 million to build it. I'm not sure why it's so expensive, except that, it has all the bells and whistles, the archive safe room, the
Fires.
fire suppression and all that other kind of stuff. So, anyway, so, I think that also is going to include like the parking lot and the lights of the, outside the parking lot, all that kind of thing. So it's $1.7 million. So, yeah, so we're looking for donations for that. So appreciate anything, you know, like. So,
Anybody have questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Terrific.
Chris?
So you said your favorite story was the bobsled story, but what's your favorite artifact that you have found?
That I found
Or has been brought to you?
has been brought to me.
Either one.
Okay, well, I like this story, the oil lamp bulb. For a couple of reasons. Can't just say I like it, I have to give you reasons. So I like this because it reminds me of when I lived near the fish hatchery. Walk in the woods, discovered something I had no idea was there. Not just, this, but the whole pile, I'm like, okay, where did this come from? Must have, so I'm already starting to think, I gotta do some research. And then I got to solve a mystery. What the heck is this? So those are some of the elements I like about the stories. And then I found, Chris has one of these at home. So it led me to other people. And I get to share this with you. So this is nice. So that's my favorite artifact I found, other than the hockey pucks. I bring that everywhere. But this one is more of an exploration in the woods. So there's a lot of value for me personally for that. And sometimes the value is the one you hold in your compartment.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you for coming, and don't forget to sign if you have not, and also take a look at, if you're a member, make sure your membership is up to date. That helps us with, all the rest of the stuff like this. And our gift card basket raffle, and all of that can also be purchased online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.